I sat on the steps just in front of the Sacré-Cœur, the beautiful basilica on the hill of Montmartre, here in the depths of Paris. Finished only in 1914 and consecrated in 1919, it is perhaps the newest Catholic church in Paris. With its snowy white finish and triple domes and otherworldly appearance, it towers into the skyline, and from here I get an amazing view of Paris. With the Eiffel Tower to one side lighting up first, the rest of the City of Lights began to flicker to life. Nights in Paris are magical. Nightclubs and dance clubs and bars and street cafes and restaurants of every variety. The city is more alive at night than during the day. Too bad I don't speak French, and I can't figure out the euro either, and I can't read enough French to figure out the subway lines. Good thing my hotel is only half a mile from here. I'm Alan Matheson, and if you can believe it, I'm on my parents' second honeymoon, because they didn't want to leave me home alone. To be specific, Dad and Mom dragged me to Paris because I wasn't handling being dumped by my fiancé. Though me and Will had been together for 3 years, Will broke off our engagement 2 months ago, and I couldn't shake the sadness. His excuse? We had fallen in love back in high school, when we were both so young, and he felt he had missed out on living the free and wild life. Will didn't want to settle down with me. I was devastated. Will had been the love of my life. I thought we'd be together forever. Forever didn't last very long. Dad hoped a change of scenery would cure me, and Mom thought a week's adventure in Paris would restore my spirits. What they didn't say, but I heard it anyway, was that they both hoped a fun fling would do wonders. I would have laughed because my parents ensured I could do whatever I wanted. Not only did they pay for my flight and trip, Dad gave me a custom-loaded debit card with $2,000 on it, and the promise that he'd load more if I needed it. The only stipulation is that what I don't spend goes back to them. Paris is supposed to have one of the biggest gay scenes on the planet. It's another world barely hidden just around the corner. Paris is very accepting of a gay lifestyle. It is said that Paris and Berlin are rivals over the title of the unofficial gay capital of the world, with New York close behind. Paris kind of scares me. They even have a whole gayborhood that has unofficially been dedicated to all things LGBTQ. La Marais, the fabulous gay scene of Paris. It especially comes alive at night. The only problem is that I have no idea where La Marais is, and I can't decipher enough of the subways to figure out how to get there. Still, that doesn't matter. I take a moment to catch my breath. I'm in Paris. Amazing Paris. In June. Once again, I look out over this city and see the crescent moon just a little above the horizon. I've never been to Paris before, and it excites me. One thing about Paris, there are street performers everywhere, even on the steps of the Sacré-Cœur. Let me explain. There are 2 sets of stairs that rise up the hill to Sacré-Cœur, plus a tram. They are very long sets of stairs, maybe 2 blocks or 3 blocks long, and the whole procession is surrounded by lawns and gardens. Those stairs arrive at the plaza in front of the beautiful basilica, where another set of decorative stairs, almost the width of the Sacré-Cœur, lead inside. I'm sitting on one of those steps, admiring the warm nights of Paris. And one of the street performers. He dressed as a clown, face covered in white makeup, blue triangles around his sparkling green eyes. He also had a large, round, red bulb of a nose and red, cartoony lips. The bucket filled with water and holding one red rose sat next to him. The tourist market must be booming because he'd sold out of roses. He stood on a little podium and seemed to watch everything, but never moved, not even a twitch, or muscle spasm, or even to scratch his nose. I couldn't tell what he looked like under the makeup. Cute, handsome, old, middle-aged, a boxer with a broken nose. The moon in the sky moved more than he did. Next to his podium was a little box, and on it was written something in French that I didn't understand. He was alone, just like me. Nobody should be alone in Paris, especially on such a beautiful night. Besides, he only had one more rose to sell before he could go home to someone he loves. I bet he had a man or woman waiting. Maybe the clown and his partner lived nearby in an old apartment. His partner had made a romantic dinner with wine, and, after the street performer got a shower, his partner would massage his feet. The poor clown must have been standing all day. I could help him out so he could go home earlier. I got up and fidgeted in my pocket for euros. I can't keep track of the money exchanged between the USA and France, and I didn't want to pull out my phone to check. No, I did not want to look like a newbie idiot. I folded the bill and slid it into the box. The clown actually raised his eyebrows. Why do I think I just gave a ridiculously small amount? Maybe the odd words on the side of the box would give me a clue. I scanned them using the translator app on my phone and quickly read, "Make a wish, it will come true." Am I making a fool of myself, or what? The clown made a hand gesture, and several balls appeared. He began juggling. Not the standard 3 balls in a circle kind of a juggle, but some kind of complex performance. 3 balls turned into 5 balls, and every 5 seconds the 5th ball seemed to jump. He carried on like this for 30 seconds. Then the balls disappeared. Into his sleeves, maybe? With a flourish and a deep bow, he picked up the last rose and handed it to me. He said something else. I assumed he said, "Make a wish." So I simply smiled and said, in English, "I wish I could have someone I could love and would love me. That's impossible, because my life is a mess. Why am I saying anything? I don't speak French and you don't speak English. That's me, the idiot. Good night." He became perfectly still again. I sniffed the rose and wandered through the narrow streets of Montmartre, finding a well-lit plaza nearby and getting stuck in memories of what could have been. Somebody gave me a friendly yell. A street artist with an easel and an army of colored pencils gestured for me to come have a seat. He even wore the classic French beret. Why not? When in Paris. I sat down on the stool and he attempted conversation, but I couldn't understand a word he said. He kept talking as if we were old friends, and drew lonely me holding a rose, with the Eiffel Tower in the background. I paid him the same as I had paid the street clown. He reached into a pouch and gave me change. I guess I had overpaid the clown. Some light music attracted me to a candlelit cafe with more tables outside than inside. In the USA, most places would be closing down about now. But here in Paris, it was like everything was waking up. The noises of multiple conversations vied with the music in the air. It wasn't just any music, but a 3-person violin trio had set up in the plaza and played something romantic. The city of lights, the city of dreams, the city of lost love. Alone, I sat down, and a minute later a waiter approached. He asked me something in French. I pointed to something at random on the menu and said, "Is this any good?" He said something I didn't understand. I smiled dumbly. He nodded, said something else, and gave me a warm smile. A few minutes later, he served me a glass of white wine, and a large fresh-baked croissant sliced in half and filled with ham and cheese and thinly sliced vegetables, with a type of pesto instead of mayonnaise. The fresh bread smelled like heaven. They also served me French fries. Weren't French fries American? In England, don't they call them chips? A handsome man sat down next to me. His sparkling green eyes captivated me. His smile was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. When in Paris, live life large. Styled dark hair and a dark blue button-down silk shirt and tight black shorts that extended to the knee. He smelled of something citrus and expensive. His skin glowed as if freshly scrubbed. Why did people in Paris always look so nice and well-groomed? The man said something to the waiter, and then said something to me. I smiled dumbly and said, "I'm sorry, I don't speak French." And with a heavy French accent, he said, "Good thing I do. Perhaps I can help translate? American?" I nodded. "I'm from Las Vegas. It's a city in Nevada. That's a state on the western side of America. I just arrived this morning. I've never been to Paris before." "Then it is very good you are here tonight," he said. "Why's that?" I asked. "Because it gives you tonight to get over jet lag," he said. "Because tomorrow is the fête de la musique." "The what?" I asked. "Music day," he said. "I want you to be my date." "Me?" I said. "I don't even know you." "And I don't know you," he said, with a mischievous smile. "I am Zachary. Now you know me, but I don't know you." "Zachary?" I asked. "Not quite," he said. "This is France. The accent is on the middle syllable. Zachary." "Zachary, I'm Alan," I said. The name sounded exotic and mysterious, like a glimpse into another world. The waiter brought a second croissant sandwich, more fresh French fries, and another glass of white wine, and set them before Zachary. Once the waiter had left, I asked, "Why me?" Zachary leaned forward, took my hand, traced the lifeline on my palm, and said, "Forgive me, but it is because your eyes are so sad. I want to give you something to be happy about." The shape of his jaw, the faint wisp of white makeup on his ear, a slight blue triangle about his eye, the way he held himself like an acrobat. Zachary was the street performer clown I had been watching earlier. It didn't sound like he was hitting on me, at least not in any normal way. I should have pulled my hand back, but I didn't. For a second, I forgot about Will and felt desirable again. I tried hard not to smile as I asked, "What is Fête de la Musique?" Zachary smiled and said, "It's a national holiday. Every June 21st, we play music in the streets. We celebrate life with our music, and those of us who don't play are welcome to join those that do, or simply watch and share the joy." "You have a national day just for music?" I asked. "We have a national day to celebrate life through music," Zachary said, "especially at night when people get off work. It's glorious chaos, and I want to show you how wonderful life can be. I want to chase the sadness out of your eyes, even if only for one night. Show me your smile again. It's like the morning dawn, and it is beautiful." I couldn't help myself, and a shy smile escaped. "You must tell me about the man who made you so sad," he said. Surprised, I asked, "How do you know it was a man?" This time, he smiled and said, "You watched me all afternoon, and when I held your hand just now, you didn't draw away." It had been years since I flirted, and it felt good to be flirting with Zachary, a magical name in a magical city on a magical night. We finished our croissant sandwiches and fries. Blame it on the wine, because I had 3 glasses before we left the cafe. Zachary paid, using the ridiculously large amount I had gifted him earlier. I told Zachary all about Will, about him leaving because he wanted more in his life than a childhood sweetheart, about him dumping me because he wanted to be wild and free. If I ever see Will, Zachary said, I will thank him for, because of him, you came to Paris and we met. But I will never forgive him, because he brought such sadness to the most beautiful eyes in Paris. Yep, that was a line. I almost rolled my eyes, but Zachary said it in such a way that I almost believed him. I didn't care that he was hitting on me. Part of me was so tired of being sad. Part of me just wanted to be happy again. When was the last time Will had said something silly like, I was beautiful? Months? A year ago? I liked being appreciated. Blame it on the wine because I relaxed. I wasn't in love with Zachary, but I loved being around him, the way he paid attention to me, and only me. It made me feel important. It made me feel beautiful. I think I blushed. Will had been too busy with his phone to notice when I was even in the room. For some reason, and I don't know when, Zachary and I were holding hands. It felt good being close to someone, even if only for an evening. Zachary walked me to my small hotel, and we arranged to meet the next night in the plaza before the Sacré-Cœur for the legendary Fête de la Musique. I'd never heard of it before, but Zachary said I would love it. We shared a magical goodnight kiss, and I had the feeling that I could have invited him to stay the night. I wasn't ready for that, and I think he knew that too. In spite of the jet lag, I couldn't sleep. For the first time since Will had dumped me, I was excited. All it took was a night in Paris. I turned the fan on and opened the window before I stripped and climbed into bed. France does not have air conditioning like we have in the States. Of course, most of their buildings are a couple 100 years old and don't have heating ducts. Some people have installed temporary units, but those suck up the electricity and make a racket. My room didn't have anything like that, but eventually the constant drone of the fan drop-kicked me into a deep, deep sleep. I dreamed about a clown with a rose taking me on a tour of the world on a Chinese junk and serving me white wine from a violin. The next morning, I had a quick breakfast of croissants and jam with my parents before they drove west for Versailles and parts unknown. I'd be on my own for 3 days while they traveled. They would celebrate the Fête de la Musique in a small town on the coast. What if Will called me right now? Would I take him back? If you asked me that question last week, I would have said yes in a heartbeat. But now? As I sat at the table, I stared out the window and thought about the life Will and I had shared, the breakup, and my new life going forward. Maybe a little bit of Paris was rubbing off on me. Maybe I was finally healing. Maybe I was the one that grew up and had outgrown Will. Before they left, my parents left me the subway instructions on how to get to the Louvre and back. Their instructions seemed so simple, but the reality took some getting used to. Paris's first subway line opened in 1900 during the World's Fair, and it has continuously grown under the city since then. It isn't the oldest subway system in the world. London has that honor, being built starting in 1860. The Paris subway system is huge, with over 308 stops, 7 layers of tunnels, and 16 lines. It literally is a hidden city, stacked deep underground. Good thing my parents left me directions, because I was able to make it to the Louvre. I loved looking at the giant pyramid by the Louvre and wandering through their extensive food courts and gift shops. It would literally take somebody days to visit the entire museum, so I only visited the Egyptian wing and some of the paintings. At 5, I sat on the steps in front of the Sacré-Cœur, waiting for Zachary. 2 bands were already setting up. A lot of people were on the steps, and a string quartet had already started playing. Looking around, more and more people arrived. A lot of people carried drums. Some carried guitars. And then what looked like a jazz entourage showed up with guitars, a drum, and even a harp. Was the entire country about to party tonight? I didn't even speak the language or play an instrument. I guess that didn't matter. My phone rang with an incoming call. Caller ID showed it as Will, my ex, the man who dumped me 2 months ago. Should I take it? Either he would tell me he had made a mistake and beg me to take him back, or brag about some man he had found. For some reason, both options disgusted me. I ignored the call. Zachary showed up, 3 friends in tow, 1 guy, 2 girls. He also carried a couple of bongo drums. He introduced me to his friends as the American with sad eyes. One of the girls said something in French and lightly kissed me. The second girl angrily said something, also in French, and then kissed the first girl. The first girl wrinkled her nose, giggled, and suddenly she grabbed the second girl's hand and joined the crowd in front of one of the bands and began dancing. She gets jealous, the guy said. Zachary handed me one of the bongo drums and said, "Keep up." "I don't know how to play," I said. Zachary took my hand, lightly kissed the palm, and then tapped it to the drum. "You hit the top of the drum with your fingers. Now you know as much as me. This only happens 1 night a year. It's time to live and watch the magic." Taking a seat on the steps, Zachary held the drum with his knees and began to tap his simple rhythm. "Copy me," he said. I sat next to him and copied. His other friend sat on his other side with his own little drum and copied the both of us. 5 seconds later, the magic began. A trio of drummers joined us, then 2 more, then 7 more, and soon we were a crowd of people drumming. All had brought their own drums. All matched the rhythm Zachary had started, and we were all in time with each other. Soon there must have been at least 50 people creating a rough circle about us, and drumming. The circle grew, and the rhythms from all the drums took on a life of their own. Several women in brightly colored dresses moved to the center of the drum circle and began a wild dance. One gave a splitting whoop, quickly echoed by the others, and suddenly a gay couple in rainbow tie-dye tanks joined them, gyrating and yelling and singing and chanting. More people joined the drummers, and more people joined the dancers. A man with glowing light sticks jumped in and began twirling the sticks, creating fantastic designs in the dusk air. Zachary and I shared a smile, and he yelled, but in all the noise I barely heard him. I think he said, "See the magic." He screeched, set his drum down, and pulled me to my feet. My drum joined his. A couple people came over to take our places on the drums. Zachary yelled at them, "Leave them there when you're done." Zachary swiftly pulled me to my feet, and we were suddenly in the throng of people, dancing and chanting and screaming and whooping. Life became electric. We moved and danced, and I chanted and screeched and laughed with everybody else. My parents were right. Paris was magical. Paris was amazing. Paris was Paris, and like nothing I'd ever experienced. There were hundreds or thousands of people about us. Zachary and I danced close. My arms about his waist, his arms lightly looped about my shoulders. The rhythm infected my heart, my mind, and even though I had met Zakari yesterday, it felt like I'd known him forever. One of the girls suddenly appeared and shouted, "Come with me." Zakari grabbed my hand and I clutched his. Somehow, we got out of the passion of the drum circle, laughing and smiling and filled with an energy I had never known before. The crowd outside the circle was just as big as the crowd inside the circle. The girl grabbed my other hand, and Zakari and her pulled me into a nearby plaza. Ironically, it was the same plaza with the street artist. The street artist was there, a crowd around him. I bet he would make some money tonight. The picture he drew for me lay safely inside my suitcase, back in the hotel room. That wasn't what they were taking me to see. "Friends," the girl shouted. She pointed to a 5-person band plugging in a guitar to an amp with a drummer adjusting position for a snare drum. Zakari and the girl must know them. They dragged me over and introduced me as Alan from America, Zakari's new boyfriend. The girl introduced her friends as the garage band called Ferrari. Their English was much better than my French. The band did a quick sound check, and then the drummer yelled, 1, 2, 3. With a heavy beat, they began to play a cover for BTS, DNA, somehow singing in both French and Korean. They alternated parts, had a nice harmony, and in only a minute they had the crowd dancing. Then they began another song, and another. It seemed like we had gone from the drum circle dance to this dance, and then we migrated to another. A whole night of dancing, of music, of fun. I didn't know anybody. They didn't know me. But we were one big, happy neighborhood. The band finished their concert at about 11, but even though Zakari and I helped them pack their instruments in a van, the night had not ended. This is Paris on one of the most important nights of the year. How to describe the crowds? New Year's Eve, with more music. All kinds of people filled the plaza, the young, the old, middle-aged. Everybody shared in this countrywide party. Eventually, Zakari, his friends, and the band, a couple of strangers from Giverny, and me found ourselves seated at the outside tables of yet another cafe. We were tired, but nobody wanted to go home. We shared white wine and a late-night dinner, and then the waiter kept the wine flowing. We drunk sang all kinds of songs and yelled about soccer. I think, at least that's what I remember yelling about. The music still played everywhere, and a drum circle still pounded somewhere. Maybe it was the same one Zakari and I had started. It was late. The street artist had disappeared, as did a lot of the crowds. People still had to work tomorrow. But it didn't stop some. Like us. A small jazz band took a position in the plaza and began playing something reminiscent of New Orleans. "Is my American boyfriend having fun?" Zakari said. He placed an arm around me, cuddled me in close, and we listened to jazz and drank white wine, and fed each other pieces of baguette smeared with a soft cheese. Blame it on the wine. I had never had such a perfect night. The late-night chill had replaced the warmth from earlier, and Zakari drew me in tighter. I thought he would kiss me, but instead he whispered, "Paris is good for you because your eyes don't look sad anymore." The music never stopped. The sun rose too soon. I woke. The place smelled of old cologne, older socks, and wine. Where was I? Because my body hadn't adjusted to French time, I awakened before everyone else. Everyone else? I opened my eyes to chaos. Zakari and I slept next to each other on the floor. His friends slept near us. The girls had a blanket over them. Around us slept various band members. The room was about the size of my hotel room, smaller than my apartment back in the States. The apartment reminded me of a cluttered dorm room. Had we gone back to somebody's place? I moved my head a little too fast. Yep, the hangover dizzies, with a headache to go with it. How much wine did I drink last night? More than I ever had before. Coffee would be nice. Extra strong. Make that extra, extra strong. I stepped over the people, found the bathroom, and in a minute stepped over people to find the kitchen. Were there 10 people in here? It was cluttered and crowded and cozy. I loved it even with all the people in it. It wasn't hard to find a coffee pot and filters. They weren't much different than what I was used to. And I brewed the full pot. As the coffee brewed, it gave me a moment to look around. Though clutter littered every surface, it seemed that we had brought the clutter with us. Shoes, some clothes, some bongo drums. When had we retrieved those? And 2 clown suits hung from a door hook. Zachary must live here. I looked out the small kitchen window. I didn't recognize any of the buildings. Zachary's place must be on the 3rd or 4th floor because, when I opened the window, I could look down to the street. My phone rang, and as soon as I opened the call, it beeped low power. I quickly answered. Mom and Dad. Did you enjoy your night? Dad asked. I found some friends, I said. That's where I'm at right now. I didn't stay home last night, so I don't have much of a charge. Still don't know if that converter works. Good for you for finding some friends, Mom said. We'll be back in 2 or 3 days, so take some time to yourself. How you doing on money? Dad said. Haven't had time to use much, I said. As the low power beep went off, I've got to go. Phone's about to. And then my phone officially died. As Dad rapidly said, I'll deposit. I suddenly had an expensive paperweight. Hadn't Will tried to call me last night? I didn't want to talk to him ever again. The phone fell into my pocket to be forgotten. No texts, no voicemails, no emails, no internet, no ex-boyfriend. Why did that sound like heaven right now? The smell of fresh coffee woke everybody, and I scrambled to find enough coffee mugs. One of Zachary's friends found some sugar cubes. 2 guys had to settle for glasses. After taking a sip and sighing with unadulterated delight, Zachary said, Alan, I don't care where you live. I want you moving in here today. I had the feeling that I wasn't the only person with a hangover. Most of us went to a nearby cafe to have a quick croissant, egg, and cheese breakfast. The French used croissants like we used bread. Funny thing, croissants made in France tasted better than any I had had back in the States. What are your plans today? Zachary asked. Impressionist museum, I said, if I can figure out the right subway stops. Easy, Zachary said. He pulled his phone out and wrote a few things on a napkin. I read it and said, that only gets me there. Zachary smiled and said, I will meet you there at 4, and let's go shopping. In a heavy accent, one of the girls said, Paris has the best clothes. I'm not rich, I said. Neither are we, Zachary said. 4, your turn to buy dinner. It didn't take me long to walk back to my hotel. The first thing I did was plug my phone into the charger and adapter, took a shower, and slept off the jet lag. My phone woke me. Will had left 17 texts and 10 voicemails, and if I didn't answer this annoying call, he'd keep on calling. I picked it up and said, Grow up and stop texting like a middle schooler. But you wouldn't answer, he said, and I went to our old apartment, but you changed the locks. I spent the night with my boyfriend, I said, annoyed. Technically, it was true. He had called me his boyfriend earlier. We're in Paris. Now leave me alone. Paris, you're lying. There is no way you could have something as deep as we shared. Not in 2 months, he said. It was my fault for breaking things off. I want us to try again. The wild and free life bored you? I asked. It was fun, but I couldn't connect with them. Not like with you, Will said. It felt shallow. All they wanted were one-nighters. That's it. It's nice to have someone to come home to. That got me thinking. Zachary and I connected almost immediately. I looked in the mirror, at my eyes. Did they really look sad? I remembered last night, the non-stop dancing, the bongos, the drum circle, all the bands, flirting that had somehow ended with 10 of us crashing at Zachary's place. I was the guy who didn't know the language, or the culture, or anything. Yet, I felt like I belonged. Something had changed in my soul. The longing and hurt I had felt towards Will had become a bad memory. Because of one incredible night, I had moved on. Are you listening to me? Will asked. My fingers began playing the rhythm of the drums, and in my mind I heard the shrieking and whooping and chanting of all the people. I remembered the women in brightly colored dresses dancing, and the gay couple in tie-dyed shirts dancing just as hard. I remembered Zachary's warmth as he held me. The fun I had lasted the entire night as Zachary and his friends somehow chased the sadness out of my eyes. I'm pouring my heart out to you. The least you can do is respond, Will said. Goodbye, Will, I said. I won't let it be over, he yelled. To which I simply said, hanging up now. He immediately called back, and when I didn't answer, Will texted. I did not want to deal with him, but I needed my phone in case my parents called. I blocked Will. Zachary, as a street performer, could be anywhere. He didn't have to wear a clown costume. He might even have a real job on the side. I followed his directions to the Impressionist Museum, the Musée d'Orsay, located on the left bank of the Seine River. I wandered the museum for at least an hour before Zachary showed up. He had traces of white makeup about his face and looked like he had run from the nearest subway station, and he was still out of breath. Wipey, I said, making a wiping motion with my hand. Zachary stared at me a moment, then reached into his pack. His clown costume and makeup were crammed in there. I took him into the nearest bathroom, and gently, almost seductively, flirted just a little bit by cleaning the last of the clown makeup from his face. Zachary smiled as I teased his lips, and then he drew in, close. Our kiss lasted a second, was warm, and the memory will forever remind me of Paris. Our first stop was a salon. They turned me into something fabulous. I no longer recognized myself. Our next stop was a plaza surrounded by clothing stores. Some of the stores would have used up the money on my debit card in a single purchase. Zachary knew of a lot of places that were more practical. We spent hours updating my wardrobe, and then stopped at a cafe where we ordered a French pizza with white sauce. The crust was different than an Italian crust, more like a fluffy pastry. I was Siri, Zachary said, when I invited you to move in. We've known each other for 2 days, and I'm due to go back to America this weekend, I said. You aren't the only person with boyfriend problems, he said. I like what I do, and sometimes I make really good money. More important, I can make people happy and smile. Like me, I said. Like you, Zachary softly said. My boyfriend was ashamed of what I did, but I like being a performer. I'm licensed. I make my own hours, schedule my life the way I want it, and I make more than enough to pay for my apartment and bills. You're free, I said. He nodded and then added, Some days I don't make much, and when it's hot, I get very sweaty standing in the sun all day. Other days I make a lot of money. Some weeks I work very long days just to pay the bills." "He was your boyfriend and roommate?" I asked. Again, Zachary nodded and then added, "We lived together for more than 2 years, and every time we fought, he always brought up how I performed on the streets. He called it begging. It's a profession, and we must obtain a license to perform." "You'll have to tell me about the licensing process," I said. "Did you show off your juggling?" Zachary gave me a smile and said, "After our last fight, he packed his things and left, and said some horrible things. I'm tired of living alone. I know you won't be in France long, and my apartment isn't as big as those in America, or as nice as your hotel room, and I don't have a glamorous job. But I'd like it if you could move in." "Where would I sleep?" I asked. "I have a second bedroom," he said. Zachary was a stranger, but I liked him. Before I knew it, I took a chance and nodded. Why did living with a man I hardly knew while staying in a country I didn't know and in a place I didn't even know the language excite me? We stopped at my hotel, packed my things, and then Zachary helped me carry them to his place, which wasn't far. His apartment was a small place, about average size for a Paris apartment, but had tall ceilings and lots of windows. A set of doors led out to a balcony with planters filled to overflowing with red geraniums, just like most of the window boxes around the apartment, and a lot of windows around Paris. I'd never noticed the simple beauty of the Paris window boxes. On some streets, they seemed to be in front of every window. I leaned over and smelled a flower, a deep, fresh scent. "We've always planted geraniums outside the windows," Zachary said. "My grandmother has pictures of when she was a girl, and they planted them then, and they're mostly red." "Why do you go to all the trouble?" I asked. "They're beautiful, romantic, easy to grow, take care of themselves," Zachary said. "And not many people know this, but geraniums have a scent that repels insects. The people who started the tradition centuries ago knew something us modern people have forgotten." I looked around at the small apartment, kept neat now that all the people from the other night were gone, and let myself relax. With the windows open, a gentle breeze blew through the apartment. Since several floors were above us, and the direct sun didn't hit this part of the building, it stayed comfortable. I sat on the old sofa, and for the first time in 2 months, I felt content. "What are you thinking about?" Zachary asked. I shifted on the couch so Zachary could join me. "What if I talked to my parents and extended my vacation a little longer? That way you could show me Paris. I'd pay rent and help buy food. Maybe you could help me learn French?" Zachary took a seat next to me and said, "Then let's start with the word kiss." Kiss was my first real word. For the rest of my stay in Paris, Zachary and I did everything together, except when he went to work. Zachary taught me to live like the French. I learned to live a little simpler, with only a few clothes, but those clothes were high quality. I learned to eat smaller portions, but those portions were higher quality. I learned to slow down and cuddle and enjoy the romance. Sometimes, walking a little slower and taking time with the one you love is more important than rushing around. The French way. In just a few days, my life transformed. Just about a day before our trip ended, my parents came back to Paris. They stopped by to Zachary's place, amazed at the change in me. Zachary had awakened something inside me, and I liked what that meant. Unfortunately, my ticket for the flight could only be changed if they tacked on a large fee. I had to go home tomorrow. Zachary and I spent the night eating French pizza at a nearby cafe and drinking wine, and later that night, blame it on the wine, because we celebrated each other. Zachary and his friends took me to breakfast, and then my parents picked me up and we rode the subway to the Charles de Gaulle International Airport. Zachary came with me. A final hug. I smiled to try and hide the tears, and he said, "I love you." As the tears fell, I whispered, "I promise to call and text every day. Please don't forget me, because I'm coming back." Zachary placed a key in my hand and said, "I'll be waiting." When I finally got back to Vegas, guess who was waiting for me at the airport? My ex. He stood there holding a dozen roses and eagerly looking for me. What were my feelings for him? 1 week in Paris had shifted how I felt for him. I loved another man now, a better man, one who had taught me what was truly important in life, the man who had shown me Paris. I didn't think I had changed that much, but I guess I had. Maybe it was the Parisian haircut and clothes. Maybe it was my attitude. But I walked past my old lover, and he never recognized me. He did recognize my parents, because he asked, "Where's Alan? Did he stay in Paris?" That's when Mom pointed me out and said, "The old part did. You lost your chance because he has someone better now." "And you wouldn't believe how he can juggle," Dad said. "Time to grow up, Will, because compared to the man Alan has now, you're just a little boy." "I don't know if Alan and Zachary have even talked about marriage yet," Mom said. "But I have a feeling they will eventually. Zachary is so handsome and so international, and he will make a son-in-law we can be proud of. Don't tell Alan I said so, okay?" I smiled and pretended not to have heard, because I agreed with her. It took 6 months to close down my life and arrange for a long-term visa. That meant I could stay in Paris for up to 6 months with no issue, even up to a year. Longer if I had someone to sponsor me for residency, say, a husband. I replaced my normal classes with French classes, learned French history, called Zachary twice a day, or he called me. When I finally returned to Paris, 6 months later, Zachary met me just outside the airport, and we hugged. It felt like we had never been apart, and yet we had been apart too long. Let's simply say that kiss wasn't the only word I learned in French. Once again, blame it on the wine, because that night we celebrated our love together. I had never been happier than in that little apartment, cuddling every night with the man I loved. Epilogue. Christmas, about 3 years later. Zachary and I got off the plane and into the coolness of Vegas in late December. Dad waited outside with the car. Though I had been back several times, this was Zachary's first time in America. I held his hand to let him know I was as excited as he was. Though we had been married in Paris nearly 6 months ago, we would hold a special reception here in Vegas right before Christmas. We didn't have gold bands, but sterling silver wedding bands. We didn't have much. A small apartment, the love of fine food and fine wine and fine clothes, and the love we shared with each other. I remembered back to the day when I first saw Zachary performing as a clown, and the little sign on his donation box, "Make a wish." I wished for someone to love, and someone to love me. It came true. The end. Thank you, friends, for joining me. I'm Gio, author and reader of this story. Thank you, everybody, for your support during this tough time in my life. It means everything to me. I wish there was a new update about my health, but there isn't. I guess that means I'm finally stable. Good news, I hope. If you'd like more stories about gay men falling in love, please visit my channel. Thank you. Peace.